When I left John's home, I went to spend time with Sophie. She was currently living on a ranch in Fernwood County, on the planet Cedar, where she raised and boarded horses. She also raised several cows, a henhouse full of chickens, a pond full of ducks, 3 troublemaking goats, 4 hound dogs, 7 barns full of stray cats, and I'm sure there's a partridge and a pear tree in there somewhere. 52 years ago, Sophie left the Earth, and her engineering position with the military, to settle on Cedar. Prior to moving to Cedar, she led a project to rehabilitate a ranching and farming community in eastern Oregon. She fell in love with the ranching and farming life. Since land in Sierra was free, she built a ranch in Fernwood. Although I remember constantly telling her the ranch keeps her too busy. I hoped I would see more of her than I do. She informed me she was my most prolific visitor, but I argue, I just don't see it. "We used to talk daily, Dad," she said. I do recall that we did. And now, I felt awful because I, too, was caught up in my own world, as I always had a lot on my mind and was functioning like I was on a mission. Even the days I spent at home suggested they had their purpose. Yet, I missed her. It was time to go visit her. As I flew over Fernwood, I noticed several ranches with ranch houses larger than city blocks, and most of the barns and outbuildings were even bigger. I loved it. Traveling at 300 miles per hour, it seemed like it took up to 10 minutes to pass by one home until the next. Apparently, some ranches lived up to 50 miles apart, which seemed like a great distance, but 50 miles would probably be considered close together on Cedar. Sophie and many of the residents of Fernwood boarded horses. Most of the horses belonged to city dwellers. At any given time, Sophie boarded up to 200 horses. People throughout Sierra loved to go horseback riding, but didn't want to own a ranch or live on one to do so. So, the ranchers boarded their horses for them, and business was booming. Over the last 30 years, Sophie had built 10 barns. Each one, except for her 2 personal barns, included 50 stalls with tack rooms to accommodate 50 horses and gear. Also, riding arenas butted up to both ends of each barn. 4 barns were full of horses, 2 were vacant, and 2 others were full of feed and gear. One barn with 8 stalls and a tackle room is where she boarded her own horses, and one other had 24 stalls where she boarded horses for the rest of the family. That barn included an area for the rest of her livestock to feed and find refuge, both built close to the house. To help with the work, Sophie had a crew of 6 companions and 75 specials, and just inside each barn, next to the arenas, were large rooms big enough for 50 specials and companions to connect to the hive when they were not working. Despite all the help, most owners preferred to take care of their own animals. So, the ranch was busy during the day, especially in the morning when most owners came by to care for their animals. Sophie's ranch was 50 square miles, just like all the other ranches in Fernwood. Her ranch butted up against a tract of land which incorporated 480,000 square miles of forests, mountains, prairies, and riding trails, called the Trail. It was 1,200 miles long and 400 miles wide. The trail was set aside for horseback riders to give them a place to ride. Otherwise, they would have to negotiate with fences and livestock. It took a month and a half to ride from one end of trail to the other, if you were a sightseer. Most riders only rode for a couple of days at a time. Occasionally, groups stayed out for a week or 2, depending on the sites they wanted to visit. The trail included old towns, historic cities, and various sites throughout, designed and built by their residents. The sites provided riders with side attractions, which added to their experience. I arrived at Sophie's in the late afternoon on Friday. She just concluded a training session with her 2-year-old quarter horse. As soon as she saw me, she ran up and gave me a big hug. "Hi, sweetheart." "Hi, Daddy. What brings you this way?" "I came to spend some time with you." "That's wonderful. I'm so happy to see you." We continued to talk as I accompanied her around the pen and into the barn while she turned the youngster back into his stall. We ate supper and later sat on the front porch enjoying the conversation and sunset. The next morning was too chilly for me. I hate chilly mornings. There was a slight mist coming up from the ground as I peeked out the window. So, I made myself a hot cup of coffee. I took it out to the barn to keep me warm. Sophie was already grooming her third horse, a handsome, tall, strong tan buckskin with an almost black mane. She owned 4 horses herself, including the buckskin, the young quarter horse, a deep gold palomino, and a patched brown and white Appaloosa. "Good morning, Honorable." "Good morning, Dad," she said as she continued brushing. "I thought you only had 4 horses?" "I do." "Why do you ask?" "Because there's another horse in the stall in the back." I pointed to a stall in the back of the barn where a 5th horse was standing staring at me. I didn't notice it the day before. It was a stately black and white paint which looked similar to the one Dave provided me when I spent time on prairie. No, it wasn't the same horse. It kept looking at me, then reared up whining at me. I looked at Sophie, questioning. "Dad, you don't remember your own horse? He's going to be upset with you." Once she said that, it came back. I have a horse. Why didn't I remember? Without hesitation, I walked back for a reunion. He was a handsome stallion, standing 17 hands with a long full mane. I opened the gate, and he pressed out, almost knocking me over. He put his head on my shoulder as I scratched his neck. I believe he was happy rather than angry. I was excited to see him. His name was Map. I named him Map because his markings reminded me of one. I whispered to him as to an old friend. "Hello, old buddy. I'm sorry I have been away so long. You're looking great." Sophie handed me a brush, and I brushed him down. As I did, I observed how Sophie was so gentle as she groomed each one of her animals. I wondered how anyone could live like this every day. A redeemed human could live any way they wanted, but many chose common lifestyles such as Sophie and the rest of the residents of Fernwood. A lot of immortals lived comparable lives to the ones they lived, or desired, before the millennium. I guess there are those who enjoy doing things the old way. I'm sure billions of redeemed humans live fantastic lives beyond even my conception of living, but Sophie and others throughout Sierra proved that was not the case for all immortals. Pete, the milkman, was a fine example. He wasn't a companion, but an immortal who worked as a milkman back in the 1950s on Earth. Now, he has his own dairy farm and markets his own milk products. He'd been operating the dairy for over 150 years. Every day, he still loves doing it. I suppose when you love what you do, it doesn't matter what it is. For some, it takes a while to settle into the lifestyle, which makes them happy. It took Pete 40 years to make the move of becoming a milkman again, even though he considered it often beforehand. Today he has a thriving business in commerce. I recalled how on Earth before the millennium, most people worked jobs they didn't like just so they could pay their bills and buy groceries. Very few were fortunate enough to find work they loved. How sad it was that most people rejected Christ and never found this kind of fulfillment, this kind of happiness. I kept brushing as I watched Sophie's gentle way with the horses. She was happy. It was obvious, and I was happy for her. I was happy for my kids. Now, I was happy for everyone. I guess you would call it joy. Despite the troubling things I carried as a mortal being, and for what lay ahead of me, I felt real peace in my soul. We spent the next day at the ranch celebrating the Sabbath. We contacted the family, and they came for the day. Early Sunday morning, when I got up, Sophie was already out in the pen brushing the 2-year-old down. I grabbed my coffee and walked out to watch. He's important to you. Why? He's a racehorse, Dad, and is the progeny of 2 Syrian champions. I'm trying to raise him up to be a champion too, but he has 2 years of training before he can race. He looks fantastic, nice muscle tone, rather thin, but I guess he's not held back by fat. Honorable, what's his name? His name is Fleet of Foot. His father's name is Quicksilver, and his mother's name is Flaming Fire. Both were champions, and now in retirement. Today, I plan to run him on the track and time him. He loves to run but gets distracted before he finishes. He's inexperienced, but he will learn. My friend Audra is bringing her 2-year-old over, and we will let them run together. Audra's horse doesn't have the same problem. I'm hoping it will challenge Fleet and he will run the full distance around the track. Sophie told me about the local horse races, which I did not remember. She told me I attended many of the events, but I had no recollection of that either, even when she explained. Apparently, every fourth Sunday of the month, all the owners got together to hold races in Cambridge. Cambridge was a small town built for the races. The races matched different degrees of ability against other horses with similar abilities. Up to 200 horses from all over Sierra engaged in 20 different contests. These events were designed to get the younger animals used to the race. The championship races took place in the small town of Chester, in the Greenway Park facility every September 21st. The town of Chester was 150 miles north of the City of Commerce. 1 to 2,000 Syrian citizens attended regularly and filled the stands and picnic grounds beside the track. There was no gambling. One got a ticket selecting a particular horse to win a race. If your horse won, you received credits depending on the odds of that horse winning. One could earn credits based on whether a horse won, placed second or third. At the conclusion of the races, the association opened a big barn full of items for the winners to purchase with their credits. Sophie told me one time a person picked up a 1964 restored Corvette. What they needed it for, she had no clue, but the idea was to purchase fun white elephant items. Another person collected a recliner from the 1950s, crazy stuff. When Audra arrived, we walked over to Sophie's track. We remained at the gate and let Audra's horse, Seven Things, make a run. What a curious name. Her horse was number 7 in a line of champion stock. We held Fleet back and let him only watch. Audra's horse ran swiftly around the full length of the track. I could tell Fleet wanted to run with him. Sophie wanted to let his adrenaline rise. After the third run by 7, Sophie let Fleet line up next to him. Once they took off, they raced neck and neck the full length of the track, and clearly, the training session worked. After 3 runs, Fleet ran by himself. He ran the full track and kept running. Sophie had to get out in front of him to stop him. The plan worked, and Sophie was confident Fleet would continue to run the full distance afterward. He mastered the lesson. I spent the next couple of days hanging off a fence watching Sophie train horses. When I wasn't loitering, or being lazy, I explored all the barns and outbuildings, with the hounds and goats following me everywhere I went. We discovered a patch of tall grass on the backside of one barn. I spotted movement out in the grass. It turned out to be a pheasant. As I stepped closer, it flew off, and once it did, several others followed. I didn't go any further into the tall grass, assuming there were more nests in the field, but it didn't stop those dumb goats or the hounds. They ran hurtling through the field like it was nobody's business. Once in the middle, the goats stopped to eat the grass. I escaped as fast as possible. The goats did not follow, but the hounds, encountering nothing of interest in the field, were right at my heels. As we passed a small irrigation ditch, a small lake, one of several geese made the wrong sound, and the hounds were in full throttle into the water after it. I figured it out. Sophie didn't have geese, and the dogs meant to keep it that way, so off the geese flew. Why is it dogs always wait until they're standing right next to you before they shake? I ran. In the mornings we stole eggs from the chickens and milked the cows. There was nothing like fresh eggs, milk, and farm life. When Sophie wasn't busy on the ranch, we went riding. One day, we rode into a small town called Clover for lunch. I missed it on my flyover. It had a feed hardware store, a farm machinery center, and an excellent mom-and-pop restaurant, not much else. We ate there twice during the week. I felt like I was moving in. She and I spent the next Sabbath alone at the house, and on the following Sunday, we traveled to the races. We took a picnic basket and found a spot next to the track along with hundreds of other people. We sat opposite the finish line. The stands were built right next to the finish line, and they were full, and the rest of the grounds were crowded with fans, owners, and horses. A group of kids ran around giving away tickets for each race, which made it easy as you didn't have to stand in line to get a ticket. The tickets were free, but you could only take one, which included a trifecta. We ate fried chicken, fruit salad, potato salad, and watermelon, which I smeared all over my face. When the race started, everyone ran up to the fence to watch the riders pass by, yelling the name of their favorite horse and rider. It never fails, something interesting always happens. I wasn't referring to myself standing around with fresh watermelon on my face. Instead, when the horses raced past us in the sixth race, one horse named Johnny Come Lately stopped and walked over to the crowd as they called out his name. In doing so, he caused a great amount of confusion among the other horses, causing them to stop too. A couple even ran the other way. Interestingly, he was the favorite, but he came over and stood at the fence and refused to move no matter how hard the jockey tried to get him going. Just then, a little boy raised with Johnny was calling out his name. Johnny heard the little voice in the loud clamor of the adults standing around him. Johnny stuck his nose up to the fence and these little 5-year-old fingers reached out and scratched his nose. To the loud clapping and the roar of the crowd, they disqualified Johnny. Eventually, the trainer got him off the track. The little boy's mother came and carted him off, too. I didn't pick one winner. Sophie picked several but wasn't interested in spending her winnings. She preferred to see the times and how the other horses ran. She gave me her winnings, and I purchased with my credits an early 1800s grandfather clock. The winner's barn was so full of odd items, like a massive garage sale. The next afternoon, I received a call from Jack. "Hi, Jack. What's up? Do you want to go to New York?" I thought I couldn't go to the Earth. Has something changed? No, but the itinerary is such it won't have a lasting effect on you or your mission. Mission, eh? I'm on a mission? Well, yeah, I guess. I didn't know what else to call it. Do you want to go, or not? When do we leave? I don't know what time it is where you are, but let's say we leave in 4 hours. 1 second, I said as I turned to Sophie and asked her if she had anything planned for the evening. No, Dad, I had nothing planned. I told her Jack asked me to go to New York, and if she wanted to go along. She said she was glad Jack asked me, because she wanted to attend a meeting in Clover, and was not planning to go because she thought I'd find it boring. Dad, I'll go to the meeting if you are doing something else. The meeting was about 3 new ranches. The city needed to agree on the property location and size of each. It was also a meet and greet of the new ranchers. Okay, hun, that's excellent timing. She appeared somewhat relieved. I said to Jack, "Are you there?" "Yes. Do you want to go?" "Yes, I want to go." "Okay, see you in 4 hours." Jack showed up at the ranch with an odd-looking transportation vehicle. It looked like a helicopter. "What's up with the transport?" "We'll be landing on a helipad in downtown New York. People on Earth would freak out should we land in a normal transportation vehicle. Remember, they're back in the Stone Age compared to Sierra. We don't want to make a spectacle of ourselves, nor do we want anyone to alert the newspapers." Once we were off, Jack explained we will arrive in New York at 1:30 in the morning, and make our way to McGee's Bakery in Lower Manhattan. "Why are you bringing me all the way to New York to go to a bakery?" "You'll see when we get there. Just go along for once in your life." "Alright, but I hope there's more to this trip than donuts. I can't imagine 2 guys who aggravated each other so much and remained such good friends." Well, I knew he was a good friend, and yet an enigma at the same time. We landed the vehicle on the edge of Roosevelt Park in a soccer field. I thought to myself, somebody isn't going to like that. The weather was cold and dropping half rain, half snow. I guess Jack knew this as he pulled a couple of heavy coats and 2 umbrellas from behind the seat. The park itself was lit up and landscaped with wide walking paths surrounded by small trees and sizable areas of grass. It looked as if it were decorated for the holidays. It's not Christmas, is it? No, Jeff. It's late fall here in New York, although it's too early for snow. Perhaps it's Hanukkah. I know Hanukkah, Feast of Lights, was always on a different date because of the difference between the old Hebrew calendar and the Gregorian calendar. I know sometime during the early years of the millennium, the 2 calendars were merged. Did that change the date for Christmas? Is it Hanukkah? You're reaching for straws, Jeff. When they merged the two, they set a date for the 25th of December. So, Hanukkah and Christmas holiday begins on the 17th of December to allow for the 8 days of Hanukkah, no earlier. Christmas. What day was Christ actually born? I'm sure everyone knows the date now, and I'm certain it was not on December 25th. Well, Christ was born when you wash and hang your jeans out to dry early Saturday morning, but they still celebrate it in December. I should have expected that. What does washing clothes have to do with it? What are you talking about? Who said anything about clothes? I knew right then he said something I was not supposed to know. At least he kept it brief. He didn't break into a song like Pete. There was a lot of speculation about when Christ was born. Many people thought it was September, others speculated on other dates. I didn't understand how it was a secret. So, I guess, those on Earth still celebrated it on December 25th. Never mind, I said as I put my umbrella up. We walked several blocks as the snow mix turned to full snow. We came to a corner with a small bakery displaying a big sign that said, McGee's Bakery. The lights were on, and I saw people inside. One person stood out. It was a young, red-haired woman. As we got closer, I realized it was Alex. Is that Alex? Yeah, the bakery is owned by her relatives. I'll let her explain the rest. Once inside, Alex came up and hugged both of us. She turned to me and said, I am glad you came, come sit down. We all sat down, and Mr. McGee poured each of us a cup of coffee, which warmed me up after our walk in the cold. Alex explained how McGee's Bakery got started in 1881. When I was a young girl before I died of starvation, my aunt, Leanne, my father's younger sister, married a man named Clarence McGee. Before the famine got too bad, they and my cousins caught passage to New York, leaving the famine behind. That was the year 1847. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know which, my father didn't want to leave Ireland. He hoped the famine wouldn't last as long, or be as bad. As it turned out, that cost us our lives, but both Tina and Leon were safe. Who is Tina and Leon? They're my cousins. They're the same age as me and Mary, my twin sister. Anyway, Uncle Clarence was a baker in Ireland. When he got to America, he took the position as the baker for the previous owner of this bakery. The owner became ill in 1879. Well, he died, and his wife did not know how to run a business. She offered the bakery to my uncle on a payment plan. It was tough in the beginning, but Clarence had an idea that made the bakery famous, especially among the many Irish immigrants. He changed the name of the bakery to McGee's in 1881. He purchased carts with propane burners designed to heat water and a rack oven to keep other foods warm. He had large pots that fit in the carts and held hot coffee. He made racks to put bread, donuts, and pastry on. The carts had firewood boxes that kept everything warm. He went around town selling a cup of coffee and a donut for a nickel. It wasn't long before he could add more carts. Eventually, people started coming to the bakery. He put tables and benches in and hasn't looked back since. I said, that's a rather detailed story. Yeah, I guess it is, but there is more. Do you want me to keep quiet? This is not the first time I have told you this story. Oh, that figures. Something else to feel bad about. I'm sorry. Did I make you feel bad? I always feel bad around you. There's so much I want to remember, but I keep drawing blanks. Remember what I told you. I will remember for the both of us. There is no reason for you to feel bad. At least we are spending time together, right? Yes, of course. Now, during the tribulation, the bakery sat empty as the current owner, at the time, another McGee, and his family were Christians and taken in the rapture. It sat empty for several years and was a big mess by the time anyone returned to the bakery. The relative who owns the bakery now is Aidan McGee. Yes, you know him. Aidan was the only McGee who was willing to restore it. He did an excellent job too. The bakery became well known, again, in the neighborhood. You and I used to come to the shop early morning because of the fresh donuts. You always stuffed your face with maple bars. But how could you help yourself? They're so fresh and warm, right out of the oven. Aiden always opened the doors just for us. For some reason the mention of maple bars made me mad at Jack. I wondered if that weren't a thing between he and I before I came here. I don't know, perhaps. Now there were 6 of us sitting at the table. On one side was Alex, me and Jack. On the other side sat Tina, Leon, and Mary. It relieved me that Alex and Mary were not identical twins. Since the farm, I was nervous that I might have emotional issues if they looked too much alike. Alex introduced me to Mary, even though we apparently knew each other. It took 15 minutes of explanation, incorporating a question and answer session, to make her believe something had really happened to me. Aiden brought out a platter of donuts, right out of the oven. Leon took one of the maple bars, leaving only one on the platter. Jack reached for the second one, but I snatched it before he could. I turned to face Alex and didn't look back. Is Jack looking at me? Yes, he is. What did you do? She whispered. Nothing. He's just being creepy, I said as I dunked the maple bar into my coffee. You will not want it now, will you, Jack? I heard a muffled voice behind me. Some people have no manners. I believe Aiden heard him too, because he went back into the kitchen and returned with another platter of 6 maple bars. We all talked for the next hour. Alex expressed how it made her happy to see both Tina and Leon. I could tell they were close. Alex asked, "Would you like to go for a walk, Jeff?" Sure, that sounds like fun. Nobody else wanted to go, so we put our coats on and grabbed our umbrellas. The snow was coming down hard, but that didn't deter us. We must have walked for 20 blocks, looking at all the department store decorations and the displays in the windows, stopping now and then for closer inspection. I loved that people still drove cars. Even in the middle of the night, New York was a busy place. Taxis were everywhere, and the occasional sedan passed by. I realized as we walked around, I noticed something different about people in this time. They had an inner joy. I sensed it in everyone we passed as several couples were also out walking. We greeted one another, always with compliments. We arrived back at the bakery as everyone was getting ready to leave. Alex was staying in New York visiting with Tina and Leon. Jack picked out a bag of donuts and 2 loaves of bread to take with him. I asked Jack, "Why was this so important you invited me now? Even though no one made a big deal about it, you did this every year in the past, generally early morning on Christmas." I thought I spent that time with George and Beth. You mean, I didn't? You and Alex always disappeared after midnight. We knew you came here because you always return with several dozen donuts each Christmas morning. I know you didn't come last year, but the circumstances were different. I wish I could remember. Honestly, I'm surprised by the things you don't know. Then, out of the blue, you seem to know everything. It's always a guessing game for me to figure it out. I'm never sure how to say anything or whether I should remain quiet. I'm sorry, Jack. No need to be sorry. We're all working through it. Write the story. All right. Are you going to share those donuts? He looked at them and then at me. No. We were quiet the rest of the way back to Sophie's ranch. When I got there, Sophie was still at her meeting. I went to bed and thought about the evening until I fell asleep,